Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So excited to be back in the recording studio, aka
Your office.
my office. Oh my goodness. It's been busy in this household, let me tell you.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yes, I feel like it's nonstop. Like even though you're like super tired, well, I feel like nesting to the max, and then we're like doing so good with potty training.
Oh, good. This is like down to the wire, like getting him
Yes.
potty trained right before.
Oh my goodness. It is, if anybody tells you that toilet training is easy, they're lying to you all. That's what I think. Cause I'm like, I don't know how. Yeah. It's like going through it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been a lot of work, but now he's doing really well. We're able to take longer like trips.
Oh, good.
And we, like I'll go to my parents' house and then he'll like use the restroom there. We even went to go see a sporting event for my nephews and he went there. And so it's just like, so now I'm just waiting for him to actually tell me. He's kind of telling me, but then it's just still us prompting.
Yeah. And even now, like, so my girls are 4 and going to be 6. Still, we're in the routine, like before we leave the house, everyone go potty. And then if we get somewhere like the zoo or wherever we're going, I try
Potty
to go
again.
potty right away. So then we can like last the whole time. So I feel like I'm always thinking about like reminding them when to go potty. And
Really?
yeah,
I was thinking it was going to be done by next week.
No.
I'm like, maybe. Just kidding. No, yeah, it has been like, but it's so funny when you look back, you're like, wow, we've come a long way in the
Yeah.
just like a short period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're
He's
almost
doing
there.
good. Yay.
He is. And like throughout the night, he's staying dry. So it's like, oh, so
That's
happy.
so good.
Anyways, so that's that. Very busy in this
Oh, yeah.
part of the neighborhood. Anyway, so today we're talking about sensory diets and what that is, what exactly goes into it, how we develop sensory diets and why, and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. So let's just start at the beginning. What is a sensory diet? I think a lot of people and moms probably heard of a sensory diet, but really like what is it?
Yeah. What is it? So it has nothing to do with food as far as like what a child is eating. It can be incorporated into a sensory diet, but we're not talking about like food.
Yeah.
We're talking about how we are, quote unquote, feeding a child's nervous system to be able to perform and function throughout their day. So, why would we implement one?
Yeah. And so a child that's having trouble with any one of their senses and being able to process that information, tolerate information, and if that's impacting any other part of their daily life or school, they might benefit from having a sensory diet. And you can have sensory diets at school, at home, anywhere.
Yep.
Anywhere the child's having some difficulty in regards to their sensory systems.
Yep. So it's just regulating each of the sensory systems so that way the child is at an optimal state. So this primarily will look at like the sensory modulation pattern as far as like whether the child is over responsive, under responsive, what's happening to that part of their sensory systems.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the school setting, we may get a referral for a student who is just really appears lethargic, may be, exhausted throughout their day, doesn't really seem to kind of register some of that information. And so sometimes we'll get those referrals and then we come in and then again, it's based off of your evaluation. So you can't just pick and choose what you're doing as far as like, okay, we know that these activities are alerting, but you really want to make it client centered for the child.
Yeah.
And look to see what their interests are, what they like, looking back at the evaluation, getting some of that information from them. And then you're going to be observing and asking questions like no other.
Yeah. And those those kiddos that do appear under responsive, like the example you were just talking about, sometimes those kiddos can be a little bit trickier, because a lot of the feedback that I get from either the adult or the teacher is that they're not motivated to work. They're maybe tired all the time. And when you're in your evaluation, you're determining that there is an underlying sensory difficulty, and that's what you're seeing. It's not that they're tired all the time, or it's not that they're not motivated. It's just they can't maintain that arousal level maybe during school at certain times, or so those kiddos are sometimes, whereas the opposite, a student who has a hard time maybe sitting still, or they're very distracted, that's
So you
another
have
type of
your cravers.
Yes.
They're either craving movement or they're craving visual stimuli. So what do we do? And how do you do it? So again, this is looking at the modulation pattern of kiddos. If we get a kiddo who is a seeker and is constantly fidgeting, constantly moving, that's a lot of times we're asking a lot of questions. What's happening right before? And I know we talked about the behavior motivation scale, but again, you're really trying to fine tune and figure out what's happening with the behaviors. As far as when it needs to be implemented, they have a lot of really great fidgets out there that can be incorporated into a sensory diet. But if it's utilized as a toy, then it's not really utilized as a tool, then that's a problem, right? We don't want to create more problems for the staff members or teaching staff if we're trying to quote unquote implement a sensory diet using certain techniques and strategies, and then the kiddo is even more distracted. That's not the goal. So what do you do? So again, when I'm creating a sensory diet, again, I try to be mindful that I don't want to give pages and pages of activities to do. But I try to kind of break it down. And I know you mentioned time, like when does this child experience a little bit more dysregulation? So you're really looking at what the child's doing throughout their day. If Johnny's coming to school and he may have a decrease in arousal, he's really tired, fatigued. First off, I'm going to ask parent, how did they sleep? What's going on with sleep? What happens earlier in the morning? Is the child having a hard time getting out of bed? What's happening in that? And so I'll gather a lot of, details as far as that, because sometimes it could just be a simple like, oh, Johnny is playing on his iPad up until midnight and going to bed at 2. Okay. But that, the exposure to the blue light will affect his sleep. So sometimes that's the intervention. It may not necessarily need a sensory diet, but just removing that will help.
Yeah, exactly.
But if a child is literally having a hard time with sensory modulation challenges and really having a hard time waking up in the morning, then maybe this kiddo might need crunchy foods. Maybe they need, a cold smoothie in the morning to kind of wake them up a little bit more. Maybe where are they, are they sitting? Are they coming on the bus? Are they coming with parent? Maybe we can adjust the music so it's a little bit more alerting music. Mm-hmm. So those are things to kind of keep in mind as far as the questions that we would ask and why we would feel the need to implement more sensory supports.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that you did mention, if your sensory diet as a therapist, if your sensory diet does include quote unquote like toys that you're using for a purpose, I think it's really important to explain that to the caregiver, teacher, and the child that they're tools. And I use the same term, it's calling it a tool. It's not a toy. And then really explaining that the purpose behind it to everybody, so and they understand that this is a toy for this reason, and this is why I use this, and I use this only at this time. Like just really understanding that is really, really important. Especially in school. It's not just a fidget toy I get to play with all the time. There's a reason behind it, and that's really important.
Yeah, no, it's totally important. And like one time I think of a kiddo that just comes to my mind, but he, during class time instruction, he literally had a hard time focusing on what teacher was saying. But as soon as he had something in his hand, he did really well with being able to focus on what teacher was saying. But it was interesting because he was very insightful for what worked for him and what didn't. And he had a spinner. He had one of those cubes to push buttons, and it wasn't giving him that input that he really wanted and needed and seeked anyways. And so all of a sudden I was like, so again, it's constant monitoring of these interventions that you're trying to implement, making sure that they're working, and basically going in, monitoring, looking and observing, asking questions. If the child is able to answer some of those questions, great. But sometimes you may not have that ability to do that. But asking teachers, and if again, teachers are super busy throughout their day, so it's kind of tricky to do that. But they might be able to give you some information on how the child is doing. But observe, see how. I mean, is the child engaged more? Are they able to really pay attention a little bit more? And then notice when you need to make those adjustments.
Yeah. If you're implementing a sensory diet, definitely takes that monitoring after. It's not that you implement it and then you're done. Because a lot of the times, just like you said, it may be working for maybe a little bit of the time initially, and then you might have to switch something or kind of change something, because it's not always going to be that consistent. Or if the child's showing improvement, then you can adjust. So there is that monitoring, that observation that comes after. That's so important for making it successful for the child.
And there was another situation too where there was a child who had the need for more auditory stimuli to help with the regulation, to feel a little bit calmer, but use that at home successfully. When he transitioned to school, it was a little bit trickier, and he wasn't paying attention. He wasn't utilizing it appropriately. And, again, going back to research, okay, so what type of auditory stimuli would be more beneficial for him to be able to focus? And when is he allowed to use those things? Because, again, we can't have a kiddo missing complete classroom instruction because they're utilizing that strategy. Because, again, we're trying to promote that least restrictive environment. Yeah. But you're really trying to make it and fine tune it. Maybe he needs to either before, or what type of music is he listening to, he or she listening to. So those are things to kind of keep in mind as well. But whenever we start off with a sensory diet, we kind of come in and we look at the evaluation first off. You're going to see where the sensory challenges are, where you can potentially just begin, and what you may be looking for. Then you're going to go and you're doing your observations. And remember, don't pick just one setting or one time of the day, because guess what? We have a sensory system that works throughout the entire day. And so you're going to ask questions and try to get as much information as far as what the child is doing when these supports are potentially needed the most. So, for example, you have a kiddo who is a vestibular craver. He's just constantly on the go, not able to reach a threshold. And I use that very lightly because, again, a craver may not be able to process that vestibular information regardless, because, again, it's just not something that they're processing. But when does that happen? And then you're doing your observations. Teachers or parents will say, it might be a little, at 10 o'clock. Okay, I'm going to observe during that time. And you're going to jot down how many times this kiddo is getting up, moving, or doing things where it's affecting their daily occupation. And you're going to jot it down how many times. Usually it's about 15 minutes. You're going to want to try to do those observations and kind of make a note of it. And then from there, maybe, if he has math at that time, then guess what? 20 minutes before that math station or that math activity, you're going to incorporate something to really get him that linear calming movement, so that way they can be prepared for that activity that they need to do. So you're constantly feeding, quote unquote, the child's nervous system to bring that child into an optimal state of alertness.
Yeah. And like, just like you said, choosing the correct amount of, or correct input, vestibular input. You're not going to want, if he likes to spin, you're not going to want him to spin around in a spinny chair for, 20 minutes before that math. You want to work on the appropriate input to calm his system, to prepare him.
To calm his system, prepare. And you can also implement it throughout that activity. So for example, it is math. Maybe you are having the child either positioned in a different way, or they're having to do a little bit more movement within that activity, so you can blend it in that activity. But you're really working and collaborating with the teaching staff to make it a fit. And what I always try to say is, and I know you do the same thing too, is you want to, and I stress it a lot to teachers and to teaching staff, as far as I'm not here to create more work because I know you're busy. I'm trying to just kind of blend in and blend in the interventions, so it's kind of second nature. It's not something that you're having to now do 10 more different things in order to get your job done.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, it's so important. Like I said, I have 4 members in my family that are in education, and like my hat continues to go off to educators everywhere, especially during a time like right now. But being mindful that, yes, we have the knowledge about sensory and all of that good stuff, but we also definitely want to make something work for not only the child and for us as OTs, but within where they're at in their setting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and again, this is what I always say too, is that just because we put in a sensory diet doesn't mean that it's completely set in stone.
Yeah.
And we're done for the day. We're constantly checking in and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And gathering more data and more information to maybe adjust it if we need to.
Yeah. Do you normally, or do you like print out for the teachers, like your sensory diet or your recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you communicate that to most of your
teachers? So
it
it depends. Sometimes I'll give a list, again, looking at what the child likes and what the child is needing. I'll create a list of activities that might be beneficial to do when you start to see an increase of dysregulation.
Mm-hmm. And making sure they understand what those are,
what that is, and how to implement it. And it also includes training on how they can reduce external stimuli that may cause some of that dysregulation.
Yeah.
So say, for example, if the teaching staff or, parent is maybe giving more directions, causing an increase in level of alertness. So again, being mindful of how their support may affect that and what to do, how the environment, maybe turn off the lights, or maybe that they need to go outside for a little water break, kind of come back.
Yeah.
So how to adjust it and when to adjust it.
Yeah.
But I've also made it very specific as far as right before school. So at 7:30, extra tired. This is what you can do from, 8 to 8:30. This is the type of music you can do from 8:30 to 9 when you're traveling to school. So it depends. And again, talking to whoever you're working with as far as what would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And emphasizing that, you don't want to have a rigid schedule when it comes to that, because the sensory systems can change and sensory supports may change, which is why we kind of write it. I write it and you write it kind of broad as well too on the IEP, but being mindful that a sensory system can change, especially when they go into an adolescence. Hormones, all of that influences sensory systems as well too. So those are things just to kind of think about. What works one month may not work the second month.
Yeah.
And what they're eating influences it all, how they're sleeping influences, even if they're in the car for a little bit longer, or that influences everything too. Or if they're going to different paths to school might influence the regulation. So there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
I think too, it depends on the age of the child that you're working with, but I always really try to focus on their independence and participation in the sensory diet. So definitely understanding to their understanding, like why we're doing what we're doing, and then helping them realize either when to ask for something, or even using a timer for knowing when to start using something. Like however you can add a little bit of independence to them, and like that initiation is coming from them, is also really important, I think. So we're not just doing it to them. They're actively engaged, and even at a young age, they can
totally
they can understand. This makes me feel better. This helps me focus.
Yeah.
I need to go get my seat cushion because it helps me when I'm doing this, or that's important for them.
Oh yeah, totally. And you can have visuals as well too.
Yeah.
So you can have like little folders where you're having visuals of, they know exactly what activities they can do during certain time periods or whatnot. But and then they can visually see it and they can use it and they can start building their own sensory diet in a sense.
Yep.
But again, it's important to be able to give them that independence and the ability to do that and to choose, so that they can start to understand what their bodies need.
Yeah. Yeah. Really important.
Yeah. So that's sensory diets in a nutshell. Okay. So for our mama segment today, we are talking about preparing for baby number 2.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Baby number 2. I feel like, I mean, I still have 2 months to go, or 2.5, but it's going to go by so fast.
And yeah. And this is a good, I would say 2-month mark is a good time to already like be prepared.
Yes.
Because
then you can't move in another month. I probably won't be able to move.
You can't move.
Yeah.
I'm thinking too, because for me, since my girls were unexpectedly early, now I'm always like, okay, that's a good 2 months left. It's a good time to be prepared. So just in case baby were to come early, and like you said, you're getting to the point where you're exhausted.
Yes, my bear claws are gonna turn into a freaking raspberry filled donut. Seriously, I feel like that. I'm like, can't believe I
do
just
your
said that.
shoes fit?
No. Oh. Okay, so I had to buy Birkenstock, and then literally I was like, I cannot believe I'm like looking into Crocs. Like, no offense to anybody who wears Crocs, but I could not believe I was like, actually, I'm like, no, that one's cute. I'm like, how is whatever?
Yeah, you need new shoes.
Yeah. So, well, the other day I had my sandals on, and then my husband was like, oh my gosh, look at your feet. And I looked down at my feet, and like there was like a little like indention, and it started to bleed. Not to be like gross, but let's just keep it real about mom life. But I was like, oh my gosh, like, and he was like, we need to get you new shoes like ASAP. So I ended up getting Birkenstock. But yeah,
it's true.
Do you have a pair of Birkenstock, by the way?
I do not. No.
Great, making me feel better. Just kidding.
Just they're really cute. You know why?
There is really cute ones. Though.
I don't have them because they're more expensive, and I literally buy my shoes at like Target.
See, I like Target too. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So apparently it takes like a few weeks for it to mold to your foot.
Oh,
but I have a friend who like lives by Birkenstock, and she like loves them. She's like, oh, well, after you get past that stage, you're just gonna love it because it just like fits perfectly.
Oh yeah. So you're in the beginning stage.
Definitely there, but it's crazy because I have to put it at the very last like little hole. Like my feet are, I'm not joking. They're like, when they get swollen, they get swollen.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So
okay, so now you're preparing. And now you have your little one already. So that makes it like 10 times harder.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, because like even just setting up the room, like we'll set up one little area and then we turn around and like something is, being undone, a little toddler, totally interested in everything. So yeah, it's just a little bit different, but it's kind of like, okay, what do we need? We know for sure we need to I want to get a new pump this time around. Mm-hmm. And Spectra actually has a new one coming out. So, but I forgot how to like even like order it through insurance. Yeah. So I'm like, oh my God, but we'll get to you.
Oh yeah.
We'll definitely talk about that at another time as far as that whole process, because I totally forgot. I'm like, I don't know what I don't know what I did last time around.
Yeah. Mine wasn't covered, so I knew I could just go buy whatever. So I didn't have to figure out that process.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can get it covered for sure. And I feel the same way. I feel like, you've been a while, like you probably want a new updated.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Updated
okay, so I think I'm going to get a new Spectra and then just figuring out, okay, what did I really like? What do I really want to take to the hospital? Because I felt like we had 10 bags the first time that we went, you know, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I'll need that. And now that I know that I have, that we're going to go in for a C-section for the second one, I know for sure I'm going to take like my belly band. I'm going to take, we really like the Lulu company swaddles, which has like this softest material in the planet. And then it's like really elastic. So it gives that nice compression to the baby. And like, it was our favorite.
Yeah.
So yeah. So for sure I got 2 more of those nice little swaddles.
Yeah.
And then, what else? Jeez.
So I do have a question. So luckily now with everything with the pandemic, getting a little bit better, I know that husbands can go into the delivery, right? So your husband can go with you, but what about after, like visitors and stuff?
What my physician told me is that 2 weeks before my quote unquote scheduled C-section date, which she said that my next appointment is when they would actually schedule it, because March of Dimes is very strict as far as how early a mother can have her C-section. So you can't have it more than 1 week before your due date. And so 2 weeks before that, I would have to go in for a COVID test.
Okay.
And if I, for some reason, come out positive, my husband can't go in.
Okay.
But if I'm not, he can be there.
Okay.
But I do need to check into that because I don't know if somebody, I don't know how that works because like power of attorney and all of that good stuff comes into play too.
It's so crazy because everything's so different. So now, did you check if your little one can come to see you at the hospital?
I don't think so.
Oh,
but again, it's in June sometimes, so I don't know what changes might happen there. And again, like, I don't want to like make it so dramatic to where I'm like, oh, I would, I obviously want like my quote unquote power of attorney if anything does happen. But those are things to just be honest and to think about because you never know, right? You're still going through a major surgery still. And those are things that you want to kind of have prepared just in case.
Yeah.
But yeah, for our little one, I don't think so. And I think it's what, 3 days stay? I think it's 3 days. So that's going to be interesting. So it's so funny because now I'm like, okay, trying to make sure that he's packed and ready to go. And,
so yeah, because you'll be gone for 3 days, but then when you get home, so then how are you preparing for when you get home? Because that is like,
that's another thing.
So
yes. So, my mom is going to come and we're just going to, my parents, when I had our first one, they were in Friends to you guys brought so much like food and that was so helpful because I don't remember cooking or cleaning, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so, but this time around, I know I want to get a deep freezer for 2 purposes. One for breast milk, because that was another thing I did not do initially that I'm like, man, I could have saved like hundreds of ounces of milk, right? Because the baby's only eating 2 ounces. Yeah. So I want to get a deep freezer for that. But then I also want to freeze, pre-made meals that you just dump into a crock pot and it's just done.
That's so good, Jenna. Like, so I think I told you my mom came for one of my pregnancies and she filled up my freezer with like meals that were ready to go. That is so.
Do you have like a booklet she used, or did she just like randomly put just different things?
She just cooked.
I love moms and grandmas. You guys are like so helpful.
Yeah. So meals is one thing. And if you're lucky enough to have either family or friends who are offering to give you meals or prepare meals, my number one advice is take the help. I feel like for me, I was just kind of, my first reaction to anytime someone asks to do something for me, always my first reaction is like, oh, no, I'm fine. And in this situation, when you're a new mom and you're just coming home, like accepting the help is really important, yes. Or planning plan for yourself when a friend says, oh, I want to bring over dinner. Okay.
Just okay. Yeah. Just say, okay. Like my mom, one time my mom is like my best friend. So she's like very blunt too, you know, but she's, one time she came over, she's like, okay, you guys both go take a nap. And then I was like, no, Mom. And my mom's like, Jenna, I said, take a nap. And so my husband and I did, but it's so funny because she's like, take advantage while I'm here, you know? Yeah. And my mom has had 3 kids, so she knows. And my mom was like, oh yeah, after we woke up from our nap, she's like, and I washed dishes, cleaned up, and then I started making dinner, and then the baby's completely fine. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes, take
advantage of that.
Whatever help is offered to you, it's so important to, you know, and another thing too, I realized, and because I do this, like I like helping my friends. And so just bringing you dinner, that makes me happy. So I know if I'm accepting help from friends, that makes them happy too. And they wouldn't offer if they felt like they were going to be put out in any way. Mm-hmm. And that's usually you're like, well, I don't want to accept help. I don't want to now they have to drive it over here and make it or whatever it is that you're thinking. But if someone's offering, they truly want to be there for you
because they know they have an experience with it.
I remember our friend, she was like, oh, what do you need? And I'm like, oh, no, nothing, you know, same response. Like, I'm okay. And she's like, okay, my husband's going to drop off a box for you. And I was like, no. She's like, no, he's dropping it off. And so I get the box and I'm like, oh my gosh, there was like all new mom stuff in there. Healthy bars and nipple cream and
things that you don't know you needed.
The best little box. Oh yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, Sarah, this is amazing. Like, thank you for just bringing it to me.
Right. And you don't realize all the stuff that because it just, you're getting used to the baby's getting used to the world, and you don't realize the things you need, which reminds me, they have like that Freedom Mom thing I told you about, just for the hygiene purposes.
Okay, so several people messaged us and said you should get it.
Yeah, so I'm going to get it. That, and then a new thing is like the DocaTot. I think that's something.
What's that?
It's like, I don't know. It looks like a little, I don't even explain it. It's like a little mattress, but the baby sleeps and it has like these ledges so the baby can't really move from side to side, but you can put it on. It's just like a little cushion. You can put it on. Again, you want to be mindful. You don't want to like have it to where the baby can roll over and fall off the couch, but you can have it to where you're right there.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's pretty cool. We'll show you guys. So that's that. And then also now being that we're having, baby boy number 2, we're pulling out a lot of my son's clothes. Mm-hmm. So, and that's something that is also really, really helpful. When your baby is outgrowing clothes, try to keep it like the 0 to 3. Mm-hmm. Put that in the Ziploc, vacuum seal it, put it away.
Yeah.
When they go to 3 to 6, vacuum seal, pull it away, so that, and then label it. And that's what we did. So now I'm like, okay, let's pull all the newborn out. Yeah. And we're getting ready with that. So washing all of that clothes, and
that's a good tip. Yeah, that's what I did when I organized in bins, and I just labeled the bins. But I actually had a friend who had 2 girls, and then she had boys, and she's like, I have all this girl clothes, and she just dyed at home in her sink like pajamas. She turned them black or navy.
Oh wow! And she's like, no way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, I'm just gonna, they're still in good shape. They're good pajamas. I just took them from pink or princess to.
Wow. So, yeah, and toys too. That was another thing we organized. Like we do the rotating of toys, but I put them all in bins and getting it situated. Like I'm telling you, I'm hardcore nesting. Like like to the extreme. I'm like, okay, this needs to go here. And again, I know that it's not going to be perfect, but if I, again, nesting, if you feel like it makes you feel better as far as what you're. Because I think as a woman, you just know that you're not going to have as much time to do all of that.
Yeah.
And so you just want to get as much done. Did you like nesting?
I did. Yeah,
loved it.
I mean, I really actually like cleaning and organizing if I have time to do so. So I did like that phase of it. And I like the excitement behind like getting ready for, them to come.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Like I just went to Home Goods yesterday and Hobby Lobby because I'm like, okay, if I can get this baby's room like just ready, then all I need to worry about is clothes and packing bags. And then that is just going to make me feel 100% better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're totally like revamping that whole extra bedroom. Yeah, I know. It's excited. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you're almost ready.
Almost there. All right. So thank you so much. Definitely don't forget to visit our website and our YouTube channel.
Yes.
It's so fun. I know. But there on our website, you'll find tons of information about previous show notes and all that good stuff and information about us. And so definitely, I was going to say swing by. Is that even? So definitely swing by our website. Anyways, yeah.
Thanks for listening.